What if I told you that the money in your wallet, the numbers in your bank account, are built on a fragile foundation, a foundation of trust. And throughout history, without fail, that trust always breaks. Every financial system we've ever created has eventually collapsed. This isn't a prediction, it's a historical fact. The question isn't asterisk if asterisk it will happen again, but asterisk when asterisk. And when it does, who are the survivors? They're not the ones who trusted the system the most. They're the ones who questioned it first. Today, we're going to journey through time, from ancient empires to modern-day meltdowns, to uncover the one secret that separates the survivors from the victims. And the final lesson might just change how you see money forever. Let's start in ancient Rome. The silver denarius was the dollar of its day, a symbol of power and stability. But as the empire expanded and its expenses grew, Roman emperors found a tempting shortcut. They started mixing cheaper metals into their silver coins. A little less silver here, a little more copper there. They thought no one would notice, but people did. Trust in the denarius eroded, then collapsed. Trade dried up, the economy crumbled, and the once mighty empire began to decay from within. Centuries later, the Byzantine Empire, Rome's successor, did the exact same thing with its gold sovereign. Same story, different coin. In both cases, who survived? Not the people holding piles of worthless metal, but those who owned real, tangible assets, land, pure gold, things the government couldn't print or dilute. The lesson is timeless. Governments will always be tempted to debase their currency. Real value always flees to assets they can control. Now, let's fast forward to the 14th century. A different kind of crisis hits. The Black Death, a horrifying plague that wiped out up to half of Europe's population. In the aftermath, a strange new world emerged. With so many people gone, labor became incredibly scarce. Suddenly, the common worker had leverage. Wages skyrocketed. At the same time, with fewer people to own it, land became cheap. Power shifted dramatically. Those with cash on hand, with liquidity, could buy up land and assets for pennies on the dollar, becoming the new elite. Does that sound familiar? Think about the COVID-19 pandemic. Central banks flooded the world with money. Those who had cash or owned assets like stocks and real estate saw their wealth explode. Meanwhile, those living paycheck to paycheck fell further behind. The lesson is brutal. Crises don't destroy wealth. They transfer it. They punish the unprepared and handsomely reward those with reserves. Around the same time as the plague, another lesson was being learned in Florence, the heart of Renaissance finance. The Bardi and Peruzzi families ran banking empires that were the talk of Europe. They were, in modern terms, too big to fail. They lent enormous sums to kings and popes, most notably King Edward III of England for his wars against France. But kings don't always pay their debts. When Edward defaulted, it sent a shockwave through the system. The Bardi and Peruzzi banks, these titans of finance, came crashing down. Depositors, the everyday people who had trusted these institutions with their life savings, were wiped out. The bankers, of course, protected themselves as best they could. The lesson here is cynical but true. Too big to fail is a myth. When the crisis hits, institutions will always save themselves first. You are not their priority. Let's cross the Atlantic to America. Many people think a currency collapse couldn't happen here, but it already has. During the Civil War in the 1860s, both the North and the South needed to fund their war efforts. The North printed greenbacks, and the Confederate South printed graybacks. Both sides printed money with abandon, and both currencies suffered from massive inflation. As the war turned against the South, trust in the grayback evaporated completely. It became worthless paper, useful only for wallpaper or starting fires. Who survived the economic devastation in the South? Not the patriotic citizens holding stacks of Confederate dollars. The survivors were the ones who held real, tangible things. Farmland that could grow food, gold, coins, or tools that had practical use. The lesson is stark. Even in America, the promise of paper money has failed before. When trust is gone, only real assets matter. Let's return to Europe, to the French Revolution of the 1790s. The revolutionaries overthrew the monarchy and, to fund their new government, they issued a new paper currency called the assignat. They made a noble promise. Each note was backed by land confiscated from the church and the nobility. It sounded secure, right? But the temptation to print was too great. They printed more and more assignats, far beyond the value of the land they supposedly represented. The currency hyperinflated into oblivion. The result was not a utopia, but chaos, food riots, and famine. The people who survived this turmoil were not those clutching worthless paper. They were the farmers with food to barter, the merchants with silver coins hidden away, the people who owned property. The lesson is clear. No matter how noble the promise, when trust in paper money collapses, that promise means nothing. Now for a more modern example, the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Countries like Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea had borrowed heavily to fuel their booming economies. But there was a catch. Much of this debt was in US dollars. When international investors got nervous and pulled their money out, these countries' local currencies crashed. Suddenly, their dollar-denominated debts exploded in size overnight. What was once a manageable loan became an impossible burden. Economies shrank, businesses failed, and people lost their jobs. And in the chaos, global investors with strong currencies swooped in, buying up prime Asian assets companies, real estate for a fraction of their former price. Another massive wealth transfer. The lesson is a deadly one for any country or individual. Debt in someone else's currency is a death trap in a crisis. And if you think this is all ancient history, let me take you to Lebanon, starting in 2019. For years, the Lebanese banking system was seen as a pillar of stability in the Middle East. People from all over the region put their money there. Then, the system froze. Banks slammed their doors shut, locking people out of their own accounts. The Lebanese lira lost over 90% of its value. Lifetime savings gone. Vanished overnight. People who thought they were wealthy were suddenly destitute, unable to buy food or medicine. Who survived? The people who saw it coming. Those who had their assets held abroad, in different currencies. Those who owned physical gold. Those who had the foresight to keep cash real, physical dollars outside the banking system. The lesson is perhaps the most terrifying of all for us today. Your money in the bank is not your money in a crisis. It's an IOU from an institution that will protect itself before it protects you. So what do we see when we connect the dots from Rome to Lebanon? The patterns are undeniable. First, inflation and currency debasement are the tools governments always use, and they always destroy trust. Second, crises don't destroy wealth. They cause a massive transfer of it, from the savers and the trusting to those holding real value. Third, banks and governments will save themselves first. Always. And fourth, every single financial system we consider safe eventually breaks. So, how do you prepare? How do you become a survivor, not a victim? History gives us a clear blueprint. First, own real assets. Things you can touch: gold, land, productive tools, or even a stockpile of food. Things that have intrinsic value when faith in paper fails. Second, don't put all your trust in paper money or financial institutions. Diversify. Keep some of your wealth outside the system where you can access it directly. Third, maintain liquidity. Have some cash on hand, not just for emergencies, but for the opportunities that every crisis presents. Fourth, develop real skills. Can you grow food? Fix an engine, provide a medical service. Skills create value when money can't. They are the ultimate currency. Finally, and most importantly, understand the fundamental rule of the game. Every collapse is also a transfer of wealth. It is a transfer from those who blindly trusted the system to those who prepared for its inevitable failure. The story of money is the story of trust won and lost. By understanding these lessons from the past, you're not being a pessimist. You're being a realist. You're positioning yourself on the right side of history. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you found this valuable, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content that challenges the way you think about money and the world. Stay curious and stay prepared.